All right, so this is a Class B ELDT or entry-level driver training vehicle inspection. For us, we decided to use a checklist for this, much like the skills test. This is going through all the items that you need to inspect, and we want to just use this checklist and go through all the steps and make sure that everything's working properly, and go from there. So I'm going to start out with a safe start. So first, I'm going to put my safety belt on. I want to check the belt, make sure it's not cut, frayed, or torn. It's not damaged. It connects and disconnects easily, properly. Everything holds. That's all working correctly. I'm going to turn the key to the on position, and I'm going to check the gauges. I want to make sure that my ABS indicator light comes on and then goes off. So that's working properly. And I want to check around me. I'm checking my mirrors to make sure that there's nobody leaning up against the vehicle, or I can't see anybody underneath the vehicle. And this is a manual transmission, so I'm going to check and make sure that it's at neutral. The parking brake is set. I'm going to push in the clutch and have my foot hovering over the brake. Again, double check that I'm in neutral, and then start the vehicle. First thing I want to do is check my oil pressure, make sure that it's rising. It is, so it's rising up to the normal operating range, so that's good. I'm going to double check neutral, double check my parking brake is set, and then slowly let my foot off the clutch, and then I could take my foot away from the brake, and if I needed to, I could exit the vehicle at this point. Alright, so the engine start was good. Just go through here. One of the first things is the air brake check, the brake check. So I'm going to actually start with the parking brake, and then service brake, and then the air brake test. So for the parking brake, I've got my parking brake set. I make sure I don't have any wheel chocks. I'll put it in a low gear, and then I'm going to take my foot off the brake and just slowly let my foot off the clutch and tug against the brakes. Alright, so I felt good pressure. I gave it a good tug and didn't move, so the parking brake is working properly. Now I'm going to release the parking brake and test my service brake. So the service brake, I want to pull forward, going approximately 5 miles per hour, and then I want to push in the clutch and bring the vehicle to a stop. I'm checking to make sure that when I press the brake pedal, it stops the vehicle, and also that it doesn't pull to the right or the left, which would be an indicator of sticking brakes. So, pull forward. Well, I'm going about 5 miles an hour. Push in the clutch, bring the vehicle to a stop. Just lightly hold the steering wheel. And it did not pull to the right or the left. The vehicle came to a stop as it should. The brakes felt good, and that's working properly. Back up here a little bit. Alright, so that's that. My governor just cut out. That's the next part. Well, I'm going to start that as if the governor hadn't. So I'm going to pump the air down. Now I'm going to check my air brake test, and I'm going to build the air pressure until the governor cuts out. That's the first step, to see when the governor cuts out. So I've lowered the air pressure. Need to lower it a little bit more. There we go. Now my air is starting to build. So I'm checking to see what pressure the governor cuts out. It should cut out between 120 or 140 psi. So I'm going to raise the RPM to build the air faster. So again, it's important for this test to see when the governor cuts out and say what the pressure is. just cut out. It looks like we're right at 125 psi. That's right where it should be, between 120 and 140 psi, so the governor cutout is working properly. Next, you can either chock the wheels or put the vehicle in a low gear. I'm going to put it in a low gear and release my parking brake, and then turn the vehicle off, let my foot off the clutch so that keeps us from rolling, and turn the key back to the on position. Now I'm going to check my air pressure loss, my air rate, loss rate, and I should lose no more than 3 psi in 1 minute. So my parking brake is released, my engine is off, and the key is in the on position. I'm going to fully apply the service brake. So I've done that. Now I need to watch that for 1 minute. The needles have stabilized and stopped moving. We're right at 100 psi. So I'm going to start 1 minute now, and I can lose no more than 3 psi in 1 minute. And you want to hold that for the full minute. So during this time, I want to explain that if at any time during this air brake check you make a mistake, or you think you did it wrong, or anything, start over. Start from the beginning, build the air pressure all the way up to the governor cutout, and go through all the steps. So at any point, if there's something done wrong, you need to stop, start over. Okay, getting close. And again, I've got the service brake fully applied. It's pushed all the way in. All right, that's been 1 minute, and I haven't lost any pressure. The needles are still at 100 psi, so my air loss rate is good. I didn't lose any more than 3 psi in 1 minute. Okay, so the next check is the low air warning indicator and buzzer. That needs to come on above 55 psi. So I'm going to start pumping the brakes, and I'm watching the gauges. The light just came on. That went off again, so I'm going to pump one more time. We're right about 75 psi. So that is above 55 and is working properly. Next, I'm going to check the valve here and see when this pops out or the valve closes. That should happen between 20 and 45 psi. So I'm going to pump down, and I'm going to watch the valve, not my gauges, and see when this pops out. As soon as that pops out, I'm going to stop pumping, and then I can check the pressure. Alright, so looks like we're right at 20 psi when this popped out, and that's 20 to 45 psi. That's within the range, and this is working properly. Alright, so that's the air brake test. Everything appears to have passed and is in good condition. So I'm going to go ahead and perform another safe start. My parking brake is set. I'm going to put the vehicle back in neutral. I've got my clutch in, the foot covering the brake. I'm checking to make sure that there are no people under or leaning up against the vehicle. Start the vehicle. Again, checking my oil pressure. That's rising. That is good. Double check neutral, double check parking brake. Slowly let my foot off the clutch, and I can take my foot away. All right, so now for the end cap, I want to complete that. Next, we've got lighting indicators on the checklist. So I'm going to check my left turn indicator on the interior, make sure that the bulb comes on and goes off as I turn the switch on and off. The right indicator comes on and goes off. Hazard lights come on and go off. And then my high beam indicator, I've got to turn my headlights on, and my high beam indicator comes on and goes off when I turn the switch off and on. Alright, and then I already checked the ABS light, so all the indicator lights are working. This vehicle is not equipped with DEF. If it were, I would check the DEF gauges, making sure that I had DEF. All right. Next, I want to inspect the gauges. So I'm going to start with my oil pressure gauge. It's at the normal operating range, and appears to be right where it needs to be there. My water gauge, temperature gauge, it's slowly rising to the normal operating range. We just started the engine, so it's still on the cool side, but it's slowly, gradually getting up there, so I'd keep an eye on that. I would check my RPM gauge. I can accelerate. The RPM gauge goes up and down. Our speedometer, we can check that later and see if that's working. I've got my voltmeter up here. It's a digital gauge, so my volts are at 14.5. That's right where it should be. It should be between 12 and 14.5 volts. My fuel gauge shows that I have fuel. You want to make sure that you have enough to get through the day, or at least get to a fuel stop. And then I've got my air gauges, my primary and secondary. I'm checking to make sure that those are building to the normal operating range, and the governor cut out again between 120 and 140 psi. So that's rising. That looks like it's operating correctly. I want to check all the gauges, make sure they're not cracked or damaged. There's no cracked or broken, bent, or missing needles. And then I also want to check and make sure that I can read all the numbers and everything with the gauges, so nothing's peeled up or covered up or falling apart or broken. Alright, so that's the gauges. So next, I want to check my emergency equipment is next on the list. So I've got my fire extinguisher down here. It's securely mounted to the vehicle. It's properly charged. It's in the green, and it's properly rated. So that's ABC. And I want to check and make sure that all the safety devices are in place. The locking pin is there so that it's not accidentally kicked, or so there's no accidental discharge of that. Next, I've got my 3 reflective triangles here. I want to check these, make sure they're at least 3, not cracked or damaged. They work properly, and they're clean and in usable condition. And then I want to check for spare fuses, which I have here. I want to make sure that they are the proper size and type of fuses that we need for this vehicle. And I want to make sure that they are in usable condition. Alright, next we've got windshield and traffic monitoring devices. So here's the windshield. I want to check the entire windshield, make sure that there are no cracks or damage, no rock chips, there's no illegally placed stickers. It should be clean on the inside and outside of the windshield, and it should have a good rubber seal all the way around, so there's no water leaking inside. And traffic monitoring devices, I've got my mirrors here. I want to check and make sure that these are clean, they're not cracked, damaged, or distorted in any way. And I want to make sure it's free of illegally placed stickers, and that all the mirrors are properly adjusted to me as the driver. As well, with this vehicle, we have a backup camera. So I want to check and make sure that the backup system, the camera, is operating correctly. How you do that is put the vehicle in reverse, and the light or the camera should display, and it is clear, not dirty or cracked or damaged, and I can see behind the vehicle as I should, you're supposed to be able to see. So that's operating correctly. Take it back out in reverse, and it turns off. So that part is working properly. Okay. Next, we have our windshield washers and wipers. So the wipers, I'm checking to make sure that they are connected properly to the vehicle. There's good tension against the windshield. There's no cracked or damaged parts. And the blades don't appear to be split, cracked, or missing. And then I want to check and make sure the operation is there, it's operating properly, and that the sprayer is spraying as it should. And it should be cleaning the window, not just smearing things around. So I'm checking that, making sure that that's working, and the wipers are working, the sprayers work properly, and it's cleaning the window. Next, I want to check the heater and defroster. So for the heater, I want to turn that on there. Put this over here. I'm going to just start with defrost, and then select the heat setting. So the fan is on, the defroster's on. I can check up here. I can feel the air flowing, and the defroster is working properly. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put this over to the heater, and I can feel through the vents that is working properly, and also down on the floor, the heater is working properly. So again, checking to make sure that the heater and defroster are individually working. So they're working properly. All right. And then next I want to check the horn or horns. This vehicle is not equipped with an air horn, so you don't need to check that. But it does have an electric horn. The electric horn is working properly, as it should. And let me see. Just want to run through the list, make sure I've got everything. And I do. So that's everything for that. Next, I want to check the light operations check. So this is the external lights. Make sure that they are working. And I have my helper here go out and check the lights for me, make sure they're working. So what I'll have you do is stand out on the right side, or in the front towards the passenger side, so that you can see the front of the vehicle and the passenger side of the vehicle. And then when I ask you to go to the back, I'll have you go to the rear of the vehicle on the driver's side and check the rear of the vehicle and the driver's side.
All right.
Thank you. Ah, my son's a dork. Okay. Left. Perfect. Right. Hazard lights. All right. Headlights. High beams. Clearance lights. Marker lights. All right. Can you go to the back? And we'll do the same thing on the back. So, left, right, hazards, marker lights, clearance lights, okay, brake lights, and we did the four ways, we did all that. All right, that's good. Okay, I want to exit the vehicle using 3 points of contact facing the vehicle. So that's 2 feet and a hand, or 2 hands and 1 foot at all times. Yep, I gotta climb back up because I left the list. Alright. Okay, so next I'm going to start at the front of the vehicle here. So this is the front of vehicle engine area. I'm going to start with all the lenses and reflectors on the front of the vehicle. I want to check all the lenses, making sure that they're not cracked or damaged. They're all securely mounted, and there's no water condensation or anything inside them. The lenses for the headlights aren't fogged over too much, and will allow enough light through. And check all of those and make sure that they are all the proper color. Alright, and then for individual lights, I'm going to check my clearance lights, my marker lights, my turn indicators, four-way flashers, high beams, and low beams. Next, I'm going to check underneath the vehicle, looking underneath there, making sure that there's no fluids puddled up or anything dripping, any kind of leaks, and that all looks good. I'm also going to check and make sure that the vehicle isn't leaning to one side or the other, which could be an indicator of bad suspension or flat tire, or maybe a load that is loaded off to one side. Okay, so I'm going to open the hood. And you always want to open the hood from the front of the vehicle. That way, if you're opening it from the sides and a gust of wind comes, it could slam the hood down, damaging the hood and causing all sorts of problems. So you always want to open and close the hood from the front. So you pull that up slowly, and then use your other hand to slowly let it come down until it connects with the supports. You don't want to just let it slam against the support wires. So I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to start with my fluid levels. So I've got my coolant reservoir here. I want to check my fluid levels here, make sure that it is between the low and the full line. I also want to check and make sure that the coolant reservoir is not cracked or damaged or leaking and securely mounted. All right, coming over to this side. I'm going to check my engine oil. The dipstick is located here. I would pull the dipstick out, clean it off, reinsert the dipstick fully, pull it back out, and check to make sure that it is between the add and full lines. And of course, you want to make sure that the engine is off when you are checking the oil. Next, I want to check my power steering fluid reservoir. I'm checking here to make sure that it is between the minimum and maximum lines, which it's right dead center from that. Also want to check and make sure that there are no leaks, no cracks or damage, and this is securely mounted. And I want to check the entire area for fluid and air leaks. So I'm checking the radiator, the engine, the transmission, underneath here, everything, every hose, again, the engine, transmission, all the parts, looking for any fluid leaks, seeing any seepage or dripping leaks, and also listening for air leaks. So that all appears to be good. I'm also checking all my electrical connections through here and wires, hoses, making sure I'm checking that there are no chafing parts or hoses which could cause a leak or damage or a short. So that all appears to be working good. Also want to check the steering system. So we've got our steering column here. I want to check and make sure that this is connected properly. It's not cracked or damaged. It's not rubbing up against anything. And then I'm checking the universal joints and the steering box. The steering box is securely connected to the frame. There are no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's not leaking. It's not cracked or damaged. And then I want to check the linkage. So we've got our pitman arm, our drag link, our upper control arm, and there's a lower control arm and the tie rod going across. We're checking those. We're checking all the joints, links, pins, castle nuts, cotter keys, all through here, making sure that there's nothing that's cracked, bent, damaged, missing, and that like these joints are properly lubricated, and again, no leaking here. So the entire steering system appears to be in good condition. Next, I want to check the air compressor. So I got the air compressor here. We're checking to make sure that it is not cracked or damaged, it's not leaking, it's securely mounted to the engine. This is also gear driven. There's no belt on the front of that there. And everything's securely connected. Also connected to the air compressor on the back side of it is the power steering pump. So I want to check the pump and power steering hoses. So these hoses coming, for the entire steering system, going to the pump, and that it's all connected properly, not cracked, damaged, or leaking, and it is gear driven through the air compressor. Okay, and then we have the alternator and water pump, which are on the other side. Let's go back over here and check this. So this is the alternator here. I'm checking to make sure that it is not cracked or damaged. It's securely mounted. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, no cracks in the mounts, and everything's securely connected. The wiring is securely tight and fastened to the alternator, and there's no corrosion on the terminals. The alternator is also belt driven. So checking the belt, making sure it has proper tension. There should be no more than 3/4 of an inch of play. The belt is not cracked, damaged, split, frayed, and that it's seated properly inside the pulleys and appears to be connected properly. Next, I'm checking the water pump. So the water pump is right down here. This is the pulley for the pump. This is the water pump right back here. Checking the water pump to make sure that it's securely mounted to the engine. Again, there's no missing or loose nuts or bolts. There's no leaks. All the hoses and everything are connected properly, and it is belt driven as well. We already inspected the belt, so I would go from there. That is everything for there. Next, we check the items on the steering axle. So I'm going to check that over here on the driver's side. So I'm going to start with the suspension system. We have our spring mounts in the front and the back. It's a leaf spring system. I want to check the mounts to make sure that they are securely mounted to the frame. They're not cracked, damaged, or dented. There's no illegal repair welds or anything on there. And where the springs are attached, there are no missing bolts or any bad bushings inside there. Next, we have our leaf spring. A leaf spring, we're checking to make sure that it's bent the right way, so it's not bent as out of shape. It's not cracked. There's no damage. We're also checking to make sure that it's stacked properly, so they're not scissoring. And they are connected to the axle with the U-bolts. The U-bolts in here are not bent, cracked, or damaged. They're securely fastened to the axle. All the nuts are in place and tight and appear to be working properly. Then we're also checking our shock absorber. The shock absorber, we're checking to make sure that it is securely mounted on the top and the bottom. The mounts are in good condition, not cracked or damaged, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. All the bushings are in place and secure, and the casing here of the shock absorber is not dented, cracked, damaged, and there's no leaks. All right, then we've got the brake system. For the brake system, we'll start with the air hose. We want to check and make sure that it's securely mounted and connected on both ends. The hose is not bent, cracked, or damaged. There's no bulging and no leaks. Also want to make sure that it's not rubbing up against anything as you're turning the wheel. That goes into the brake chamber. The brake chamber, we're checking to make sure that this is not bent, cracked, damaged. It's securely mounted to this bracket here. No loose or missing nuts, and it is not leaking. The clamp here is in place and secure. That helps hold everything together. Next, we're checking the push rod. The push rod should be coming straight out of the brake chamber. It is not bent, cracked, or damaged, and it's connected to the slack adjuster here with these pins and cotter keys. And then we would check to make sure that there's no more than 1 inch of play when we're pulling on this in this direction. So you would measure here, pull it out as far as you can, and make sure that there's no more than 1 inch of travel. The slack adjuster, we're checking to make sure that it is securely mounted, it's not cracked or damaged, and it is properly lubricated. Next, we're going to go inside here. This is the brake linings. The linings, we're checking to make sure that they are not cracked or damaged. They're seated inside the drum, and that they have a minimum thickness of 1/4 inch. You can check that down here. You can see that little notch. That first little part there is the 1/4 inch indicator. We also want to make sure that it is not separating from this metal backing plate. Let me see. Then we've got the brake drum. We're checking the drum to make sure that it's not cracked, damaged, it's not worn too thin. There's no grooves. There's also no illegal repair welds or anything on the drum. We're also checking for signs of overheating. So in here where you can see the silver part, if you see any kind of bluing, that's an indicator that it overheated, or any stress fractures or like little hairline cracks inside there is an indicator of overheating. All right, next we've got brake contaminants. So we're checking inside the drum and the lining to make sure that there is no oil or grease or any kind of debris that could cause the brakes to work improperly or to not work at their full capabilities. Now we have the tires. For the tires, there's 3 things we're checking. There's the condition of the tire, the minimum tread depth, and the inflation. So the condition of the tire, we're checking the sidewalls and the top, looking to make sure that there's no cuts, bulges, abrasions, gashes, any chunks missing that would expose the plies inside the tires. And we want to make sure we have even tread wear, and there's nothing in here that could cause leaking, like screws, nails, or any other kind of foreign objects inside the tires. Again, you're checking both sidewalls and the top. This also should not be a recap or retread tire. Next, we're checking the minimum tread depth. So the minimum tread depth of all the tread grooves here is 4/32 on the steers. You would check that using a tire gauge. So again, any one of these major tread grooves all the way around, minimum of 4/32 of an inch using a tire gauge. And then we've got the inflation. So we would find the valve stem, which is down here. We want to check and make sure that this is not bent, cracked, or damaged, and that it has a cap in place and securely fastened. We would check the tire pressure here using a tire gauge and make sure it's at the proper inflation. These tires should be right around 100 psi for this vehicle. Every vehicle could differ. Next, we're going to the rims. The rims, we're checking to make sure we have a good bead around the rims. They're not cracked, damaged, or bent. We're checking the rest of the rim, making sure that there are no cracks or dents or damage, and there's no illegal repair welds. We're also checking the bolt holes that these studs go through and making sure that they are not distorted or elongated in any way. Next, we've got our lug nuts. We're checking all the lug nuts to make sure that they're all tight and that they're all present. You would grab them and twist them both ways. And if they turn by hand, they're obviously not torqued down properly. We're also, if you feel any movement in these rings, even if you can't turn the lug nut, that's an indicator that these are loose. Now, we're also checking for other signs of looseness, which could be rust trails. So coming from underneath, water gets underneath these rings, and then as you drive, centrifugal force will have that trail straight out. So if you see rust trails going straight out from the lug nuts, that could be an indicator that these lug nuts are loose. Or if you're seeing shiny threads, so here on the studs, as you remove these lug nuts and put them back on, it'll clean these threads up. So if you're seeing shiny threads, that's an indicator that, the tires may have been worked on, the vehicle may have been worked on, tires removed, and they may or may not have torqued these down properly. So we're checking for all those. And then we're checking all the studs to making sure that these are not damaged in any way. Next, we've got our hub oil seal. We're checking this to make sure that there's no leaks, there's no cracks or damage, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and the plug is in place. We have the proper amount of fluid inside there. All right. Next, we're going to check the side of the vehicle. I'm going to check all the lenses and reflectors on the side of the vehicle, making sure that they're all in place, they're secure, they're clean and reflective or light up as they should, and also checking to make sure there's no water or anything, any kind of condensation inside the lenses. And that's all the lenses and reflectors on the side of the vehicle. So from there, we're coming over here to the door and mirrors, traffic monitoring devices. I want to check the mirrors here, make sure that the brackets are securely mounted to the door. They're not cracked or damaged, they're secure, they're not bent. We have our mirrors or traffic monitoring devices here. They are clean, in good condition, not cracked or damaged, and securely mounted so they're not sitting there vibrating. Check the door, make sure that the door is closed all the way. It opens and closes easily. Again, closes properly. Want to check the hinges on the inside, making sure that they're in place, no cracked or damaged, loose or missing nuts or bolts or hinges. Want to check the seal on the inside of the door. So this particular vehicle has seals on both sides, on the door and inside here. So I want to check that, make sure that it's there in place, not cracked, damaged, or missing, and that's the case on both sides. There's also another reflector here for when the door is open. and people are coming here, I want to check and make sure that, you know, that's clean and working properly. Next, I've got my steps. So I'm checking the steps to make sure that they're securely mounted. They're not cracked or damaged. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And there's nothing on here that could cause me to slip or fall or trip, catch my shoes or on anything. There's no oil. There's no spilled fuel down here, which can be quite slippery. So that's connected to the tank straps and on there securely. Next, we're checking the fuel tank. The fuel tank, I'm checking to make sure that there's no cracks or damage all the way around, underneath, everything that I can see. And I'm checking to make sure there are no leaks on any part of this, including the fuel lines. I want to check those and make sure there are no leaking. Next, we're checking the fuel cap. The cap is in place. It's securely fastened in here. It's snug. Inside here, there should be a good rubber seal so that it doesn't leak, as well as a safety chain so that if you forget to put the cap on after fueling, you don't lose the cap. So there's that. Next, we have the battery box. The batteries, we're checking to make sure that they are not cracked or damaged. They're securely mounted. If you can easily access the batteries or remove the cover, you can do that. The batteries are securely fastened in here, so there's no movement. They're not cracked or damaged. They're not bulging. There's no leaking. We want to check all the cables, make sure that they're securely fastened and that the terminals are not corroded. Now, if the cover is not easily removed or replaced, then you don't need to worry about opening that during the test. But if you do take it off, make sure that you get that lid back on there properly. So we also want to make sure that the cover is in good condition, not cracked or damaged or missing. Next, I'm going to check the frame of the vehicle. So I'm going to check from the front to the back, checking the frame to make sure it's not twisted, it's not damaged in any way, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, there's no obvious holes where there used to be bolts. This has a box, so I've got U-bolts here as well. I want to make sure that those are all in good condition, they're all nice and securely fastened, and everything's securely connected. Also want to check the cross members of the frame and make sure that they are not damaged or broken or twisted, and there's no illegal repair, welds, or anything like that. And there should never be any holes or welds on the top and bottom flanges of the frame. All right. So that is everything for the side of the vehicle. Next, actually want to check the drive shaft. So from the transmission all the way to the rear end, the differential, I'm going to check the drive shaft, make sure that it's securely connected, it's not cracked or damaged, the drive shaft is not twisted or dented or anything. We've got these carrier bearings here. This vehicle has multiple carrier bearings so that it can help support that. We want to make sure that those are securely connected, not damaged, and no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And the universal joints that are inside here are connected properly, and they are not loose, not cracked or damaged, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. Okay. Now for the drive axle, I would check the braking system the same as I checked on the steering axle. So I would check the air hoses, the brake chamber, the slack adjuster, and push rod. I would also check the drum and linings and brake contaminants. Again, all the same as I checked on the front of the vehicle, because it's the same type of brake system. Same thing with the suspension system. I've got the spring mounts, the springs, U-bolts, everything the same as we inspected on the front. Back here, we've got the tires. I would inspect the condition and the inflation the same way as I inspected the steer tire. And the minimum tread depth on these tires is a minimum of 2/32 of an inch. Again, check that using a tire gauge. The differences between the front and the back, obviously there's two tires back here, so we have duals. We want to make sure that both of these have about the same amount of tread, they are the same type of tires, so radial or bias ply. And then we want to check the bud space area here and make sure that there's nothing lodged in here, and that in between there's no gap between the rims. There's no rocks, bricks, or anything inside here that is lodged that can come out as you're driving down the roadway. So the rims and the lug nuts I would inspect the same way as I inspected the steering axle. Back here we have an axle seal. So this is a little bit different. This is actually lubricated from the differential. So this, we're checking to make sure that the seal is good. There's no leaks, no cracks or damage, no loose or missing nuts or bolts. And there's also another seal on the inside of the tires there. And we want to check and make sure there's no leaks there as well. Okay, back here we've got our splash guards. Splash guards, we're checking to make sure that they're covering the entire width of the tire and at least 50% of the tire. Usually you want to have at least 6 inches of space between the bottom of the mud flap and the ground. And you want to make sure that these are not cracked, damaged, or missing. All right, so we go to the rear of the vehicle. This vehicle is equipped with a lift, so we want to check the lift, make sure that it's securely fastened and locked in place. It's not cracked or damaged, and properly stowed. Any safety devices that are there are in place and properly being used, so that doesn't come down on you while you're driving. We also want to check our traffic monitoring device back here. We're checking the camera on the back of the vehicle, making sure that it's securely connected, it's clean, not cracked or damaged, and properly mounted. I want to check all the lights and our lenses and reflectors on the rear of the vehicle, making sure that they're all properly attached, not cracked or damaged, there's no water condensation or anything in there, and they are all the proper color. Also want to check for reflective tape that's required on the back of this vehicle, make sure that it's in place as it should be. For the functionality, we have our clearance lights on the top, we have our turn indicators and brake lights and four-way flashers. They are all working, properly and the proper color. And then we also want to check our marker lights down here. Our DOT bumper down here is in place, securely mounted, not cracked or damaged, and not missing or anything. We do have the door on the back. Can't really see it, but we want to check the hinges, making sure that they're in good condition. They're not missing, cracked, damaged. The door latches and locks properly as it should, and everything is securely fastened and closed. And then just going to go through here real quick. And that is everything for the inspection. Well, I'm just going to check over here, make sure that there's nothing unique to this side of the vehicle. There doesn't appear to be, so that is everything.